This episode is sponsored by Brilliant. SpaceX Starship updates, Blue Origin updates, and inside Kennedy Space Center. My name is Felix and I am your host for today's episode of What About It? Man, I haven't said that in a long time. I hope you didn't forget me and I hope you survived the longest stretch of no release since the channel started. As you might know, I did a long trip to the United States, I visited the Kennedy Space Center and watched the CRS-20 launch, and I paid a visit to Boca Chica to see the Starship launch and production facilities. But before we get to that, there has been a lot going on in the space industry lately, so let's dive right in. Starship updates. Now, how do I go about this one? There has been so much happening since the last update that I really don't know where to start. Let's just have a look at what's happened since the last update to get on the same page again. Remember serial number 1? This is the Starship prototype I focused all my reporting on before I left for the States. Shiny big tank section, almost finished nose cone. We already had reports from Elon about possible static fires, and in our imagination we already saw it fly. Well, technically it did fly, just not as high as we would have expected it to go. This happened when I was touring Kennedy Space Center and preparing for the CRS-20 launch. I saw this one on my phone laying on the bed in my hotel room at 5 in the morning. Let me tell you, it's better than any coffee to wake you up instantly. The reason for the explosion? Don't shuck the puck. SpaceX identified the reason for the explosion to be a bad weld where the thrust puck is connected to the lower bulkhead. The thrust puck is a part connecting engines to the lowermost bulkhead on the tank section of the Starship prototypes. On serial number 1, this thrust puck was not welded incorrectly, causing a very spectacular sudden decompression at around 8.5 bars of pressure. It's a very good result though, and another lesson learned. Then came serial number 2, a stripped down version of the lower part of the tank section where the problem on serial number 1 occurred. A quick build, nonetheless not a dirty one. The welds improved again and so did the construction time. It took SpaceX 7 days to put it together and get it on the test stand at the launch site. First came a test with water and then a cryogenic test. I watched it live with lots of people from the upper floor of the restaurant at South Padre Island where I had one of my meetups. The next day, Elon tweeted the results and it passed the tests. What's special about this test is that SpaceX used a hydraulic press under the tank to apply pressure to the famous thrust puck to simulate thrust applied by Raptor engines at liftoff. So while I was in the States, SpaceX seems to have finally finished the tank test phase, as Elon tweeted shortly after that they are planning static fire and short flights with serial number 3 and longer flights with serial number 4. As it seems, serial number 3 will finally be the Starship prototype to take flight. This does not mean that it'll be the first one to work properly, but it would be a very important milestone to finally see a Starship with working engines. If we want to have flying Starships, we will need Raptor engines. If we want to see flying super heavy boosters, we will need even more of them. SpaceX is not only working on Starships in Boca Chica. McGregor, Texas, where SpaceX tests their engines, does an evenly important job right now. In this picture, you can see Raptor serial number 18 undergoing a test fire at SpaceX's brand new third Raptor test stand. Musk said that spooling up the whole Starship Raptor production line is really what matters. And SpaceX seems to be determined to meet the goal on time. They repurposed the old tripod at their McGregor test range originally used to test fire Falcon 9 boosters. It now is capable of testing Raptor engines at full thrust conditions. This enables them to speed up development, as more testing means more data and more data means faster progress. If we enhance the picture a little bit, a lot more details become visible. The complexity of a rocket engine always fascinated me, and this engine will need to be mass-produced at an incredible rate to meet the demand of the Starship test program. SpaceX chose to repurpose the vertical stand for a reason. All the tests done prior were performed in a horizontal configuration. A vertical stand enables SpaceX to test the engines with the right orientation, pointing down. Recent rumors of Raptor test fires indicate that SpaceX is speeding up testing right now. Tests with 1-minute burns have been reported from McGregor by Reagan, aka Blue Moon Dance 74. Thank you so much for keeping us informed. And one more about the Raptor engines needed for serial number 3. See anything interesting in this picture? Yup. The sign on one of the containers is kinda obvious. It's one of the containers at the launch site and it says Raptor on it. Is this where SpaceX already keeps the Raptor engine, or maybe even engines, for their upcoming tests? I'll, as always, keep you informed. Serial number 3 is already making good progress with focus on plumbing and systems integration. If all goes as planned, which is really hard to predict of course, SpaceX will finally do a static fire soon and then go for a first Starship hop right after. Work seems to have begun on yet another nose cone as well. It's not known yet what it'll be used for, but Boca Chica gal gave us some awesome close-ups of the spherical header tank and the upper part of the nose cone. As shown on my last episode, the new pad takes shape quickly as well. As it's heavily reinforced with rebar, it's made to last for a while. And it seems like my initial guess was right. SpaceX is erecting yet another tent at the construction site, expanding construction space more and more. In this picture, taken by Louis aka Lab Padre only a few days ago, one thing easily becomes apparent. SpaceX is not nearly done with extending the construction site. Finally, a parking lot is being made for the workers, and right next to the 3 large onion tents you can already see the prepared place for the 4th tent, which as mentioned has recently received concrete covering. Expansions are planned all around the site as well, with measuring markers all over the place. Louis, you rock. On my tour with Maria Pointer we walked all the way to the back of the site and the signs were hard to miss. The complex will be made larger and larger over time. What we see today is only a fraction of what SpaceX is planning for Boca Chica. A truly inspiring sight and yet another remarkable testament for SpaceX's determination to advance spaceflight further. This is it, the progress of only about 2 weeks, and it is hard to imagine what SpaceX will achieve in 2020 alone. The Starship facility. It's a very strange place between Boca Chica Village on one side and the dunes on the other. This is where the future of spaceflight is being tested and developed. This is where history is work in progress. Blue Origin update. Now let's get our focus to another big player getting ready for 21st century spaceflight. Jeff Bezos is thinking big at Cape Canaveral. What I saw while staying at Kennedy Space Center can only mean one thing. Blue Origin means business. What you see in this video is what you're greeted with when you're driving towards the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. It's Blue Origin's New Glenn manufacturing and assembly facility, and it's one of the largest complexes at Cape Canaveral already. Blue Origin has not launched a rocket into orbit yet. There's almost no sight of their upcoming super heavy launch vehicle named New Glenn yet. And still it does not take a Sherlock Holmes to connect the dots. You do not invest so much money, even when you're very rich, if you don't mean business. The same scene can be seen at Launch Complex 36. Blue Origin's new launch pad planned to be used exclusively for New Glenn launches. It's huge. The water tower overlooking the scenery is the largest to be found at the Cape. The launch complex itself and the horizontal integration facility second to none. Double the size of what SpaceX uses for their Falcon 9 rockets at Pad 39A. And work is progressing fast. Both the production facility and the launch complex look like ants' nests with workers all over the place. And recently Blue Origin gave us the first ever looks inside their manufacturing plant at Exploration Park. And that first look was very impressive. Here you can see a brand new 7-meter fairing made for New Glenn. In comparison, a Falcon 9 fairing only measures in at a diameter of 5.2 meters. This is a significant difference, opening up a whole new world of payload sizes. Its volume is almost 50% larger than any competitor's capacities. In fact, the new Shepard rocket we saw in multiple tests now fits into New Glenn's fairing. This makes it the largest composite fairing ever built. This will enable Blue Origin to serve all missions with just one rocket configuration. The only thing needed now is a very low price tag per launch to be competitive. Blue Origin has also finally offered us a look at their tank construction process. Here one thing becomes apparent. Blue Origin's approach is very different from what we can observe in Boca Chica, Texas. Clean rooms, high-tech and robotics are used to assemble the first tank test articles for the New Glenn rocket. The approach of a single facility construction is the same though. Almost everything is being built on site, lowering cost and speeding up development in the process. And what we can see in this first ever look behind the scenes is that Blue Origin is advancing fast. My speculation that there is more going on behind these blue walls already seems to have been right. With first flights planned for 2021, Blue Origin seems to be on track. Finally, we got another look at the only visible part from the new Shepard prototype. The new Glenn upper stage BE-3U engine. There will be two of them on the upper stage, and it's a variant of the BE-3PM used on New Shepard. It's a so-called expander cycle engine. It uses heat from the main combustion chamber to drive the fuel turbopumps. No pre-burner needed. This comes with two major advantages. Reusability, as the gaseous fuel used to drive the pump turbine is at room temperature. This produces little wear and tear. And reliability, as a turbine is much less complex compared to a pre-burner, which essentially is a miniature rocket engine with all its complexity. The critical design review was passed, and Blue Origin right now is in the process of building hardware for tests. The test phase will be used to refine the design and get the maximum out of the concept. Using the heat from the combustion chamber in the most efficient way is priority number one at this time. So, to sum it up, Blue Origin has the BE-5 engine ready to go, the BE-3U in the process of refinement, the fairing produced and the tanks in production as well. It's hard to tell how long Blue Origin will work to get the first test rockets out of the door. If we were talking Starship here, I'd say a week or two, but as Blue Origin is taking it a bit slower, a few months up to a year sounds realistic. This would be enough to be on track for first test launches in 2021. Hopefully, this update showed you that you do not need to have successful launches in the book to be worth an update now and then. Blue Origin no doubt is already a serious competitor on the launch provider market, and the competition will be watching them closely. Inside Kennedy Space Center. So I spent some time in Florida recently, and I want to show you why you should too if you get the chance in the future. The Space Coast is a remarkable place to be at, and Kennedy Space Center is the Trinity site and Mount Everest together when it comes to US spaceflight. The Kennedy Space Center, when it comes to tourist access, can be divided into roughly two different kinds of attractions. The Visitor Complex and everything surrounding it. Operated by a subcontractor, the Visitor Complex is sort of an amusement park for rocket enthusiasts and those who want to know what all the fuzz is about. With attractions like the Rocket Garden, the Atlantis Exhibition or the Saturn V Center, it showed me how much larger spaceflight really is compared to what you can find in documentaries or on YouTube. Spaceflight has produced some of the most impressive machines ever created. Seeing a full-size Saturn V rocket with my own eyes made me realize how epic the Apollo days actually must have been. It's unimaginable what kind of feeling it must have been to sit in a capsule on top of one of these beasts strapped into a seat waiting for the countdown to hit zero. And the same goes for the shuttle era. All the budget talk, how the space shuttle was too expensive and maybe unreliable, vanishes in front of the Atlantis orbiter. It's a majestic sight to see, and it shows how advanced and incredibly complicated these orbiters were. It created incredible respect in me for the engineers, the scientists, countless numbers of workers, and last but not least for the astronauts who were brave enough to put their lives at risk to operate them. One of the running gags Sammy and I had that week was the word twang. That's what NASA called the leaning motion the shuttle went through, created by the immense asymmetric thrust of the three massive RS-25 engines just before liftoff. But what must it have felt like to see this tilting motion through the windows of the shuttle cockpit right before the solid rocket boosters fired? You can feel and smell and sometimes even touch all of these extraordinarily historic moments at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, and the way in which they are presented is truly mind-blowing in the very meaning of the words. Secondly, we have everything that surrounds the Visitor Complex. A labyrinth of roads, launch pads, and the occasional alligator on the roadside. Where the Visitor Complex is shiny and glamorous, the rest of what you can experience on all sorts of guided tours is a contrast between new and old. At Pad 39A, for example, you can see SpaceX getting ready for their next Falcon 9 launch, and you can see them erect a launch mount for their next big project, the Starship. Here is where present and the future are shaped. The latest technology, upcoming milestones, and cutting-edge development. This in return shows that even though Cape Canaveral has decades of history already, it still has a lot more to come. Countless rocket launches and the ever-growing curiosity to send the next interplanetary probe just that little bit further than the last. And then you have the contrast between the current age of spaceflight and the very early beginnings. Cape Canaveral is a place where in one day you can span almost a century of history in a 15-minute bus ride. Apollo meets Delta IV Heavy in one picture. My special recommendation though goes to the Rise to Space tour. It's the most expensive, the longest and the most value for money when it comes to tours at Cape Canaveral. It leads you from the Redstone rockets past all the old and new launch sites towards a very special place only accessible through this one tour. I call it the True Rocket Garden. We were on tour number 6 ever done, as it is a very new experience that was started early this year. At the end of the tour, the bus pulls into a small parking lot right next to the Cape Canaveral Lighthouse and a rather unspectacular hangar building next to it. The lighthouse is an experience on its own, as it's over 170 years old, being by far the oldest building at the Cape. But that's not even the main part of the stop. It's that unspectacular hangar. It's called Hangar C. Besides being the oldest hangar structure at the Cape, you can find dozens of rockets, cruise missiles and boilerplate capsules from the early days of spaceflight in it. All in pristine condition and all of them just sitting there. No wall or glass window protects them. Ever ducked under an Atlas rocket to get to the other side? Ever peeked into an engine bell of a Snark cruise missile? Hangar C is a must for any through rocket enthusiast visiting Kennedy Space Center. Kennedy Space Center is remarkable to say the least, and I'll never forget this first visit. So here's my travel recommendation for Cape Canaveral. Do it. You will not regret this. I spent 6 days there and turned every stone. I did all the available tours and had as much fun as a kid in a candy store. And last but not least, you can watch a rocket launch live. I want to say thank you to Julia Bergeron and Starfleet Tours for an unforgettable evening and for a very special viewing angle of the CRS-20 launch and landing. You rock! It's addictive and I can't wait to see another launch already. And as always, I'm running out of time. An episode only fits so much and episode 77 is already at an insane length. There was so much more to explore and see, and my patrons can consider themselves lucky, as I will upload a lot of that footage as raw episodes to them in the coming weeks. If this trip has shown me anything again, then it's that a new experience, something truly new learned, is priceless. It widens your horizon and it opens your mind for thoughts you wouldn't have been able to even theorize before. And the same goes for today's sponsor, Brilliant. Did you ever wonder what a Hohmann transfer orbit is? Or were you looking for a way to understand the mechanics behind it? Or how a circular orbit works? Does the typical falling faster than the curvature of the Earth explanation not satisfy you? How about escape velocity? How fast do you need to move to escape a gravity well, and what is mass? How does the universe surrounding us connect with your daily life? All these questions and many more are answered in an understandable and satisfying way at brilliant.org. Dive into a library of answers to all sorts of STEM knowledge, from the absolute basics all the way up to quantum physics. To widen your horizon and at the same time support What About It, go to brilliant.org/whataboutit and sign up to get access to over 60 interactive courses for free. And if you choose to get the premium subscription, the first 200 to join up through the link will get 20% off their annual premium subscription. So think outside of the box with Brilliant. Links in the description. So this wraps up today's episode of What About It? Will we finally see a Raptor engine light up in Boca Chica again soon? And did you ever visit Kennedy Space Center, and what was your experience like? As always, tell me in the comments. This might be the perfect episode to thank my patrons for all their support. Not only was it partly funded by them, 2 of them traveled with me and many more showed up at 3 different meetups. This shows once more what a unique relationship I have with them. They make What About It go forward, they make it all possible, and they go above and beyond in supporting the show. So show some love in the comments and maybe even consider becoming one yourself. And as always, there are new members in the ever-growing Y Army. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Dean Carras, Brandon Fortino, Tom Hartger, Gio Pagliari, and many more. You rock! Thank you for watching this episode of What About It, and now would be the appropriate time to hit the like button, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell button to actually receive a notification when I do my uploads. It's a version of support that doesn't cost a penny, and it does help me to produce more and better content. And if you do want to spend your money, consider becoming a patron and get insights into the production of What About It and chat with me on the Discord. Or you could buy yourself a new shirt on our merchandise store and look like me. There are plenty original designs available in good quality for a low price, made by a space nerd for other space nerds. It all helps me to give you the latest and greatest about space and science. I hope to see you on the next episode. Until then, have a great time. So Mary, Julia, Maria, Jean, Louis, Sammy, David, Jared, and many others, you made this trip awesome. Thank you very much. You rock. This is a long one. This is a